Hello, everybody, and welcome back to This is the Year, the Swiss AI Engineering Podcast. And in this week, a special one because we had to shoot it a little bit earlier for two specific instances. I'm going to the Executive Summit on AWS this Thursday, which is usually our shooting day. And Joao, the AI wizard, with me today, he's going to Berlin as well. So we had to quickly front load the episode. But how are you? How are you doing, Joao? All good?
Doing good. I've done most of the packing, planning some things around, but I never have a full plan or a full itinerary like some people like to do. I have asked a few suggestions from the LLMs around the world. Different LLMs giving different suggestions. I usually mark whatever are like the items that get duplicated between different asks. So if Gemini says something, OpenAI says something, I usually write down whatever the things that they repeated between each other, because if different LLMs are giving the same suggestion, I'm assuming it's a good one. Or maybe they're just saying whatever is the most popular thing.
What do they?
Places to go, things to visit, things to do.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. Hope you're having a good time. Maybe just for the episode today, quick outline. We are adding one layer on top regarding vibe coding, but that's in the second stage of today's episode. But first, we start with this human-in-the-loop interaction. We've been mentioning that multiple times. I've also been preparing the slides for the next semester regarding, again, putting humans and feedbacks from humans in the GUI, the graphical user interfaces. But today we thought, why not we give a bit of a deep dive of how could we design maybe user interface and how do we think about something called autonomy sliders, some nuances on this topic. And then we rounded off with a tech roundtable hosted in the WhiteHouse. That was pretty cool to see. And also documentations for LLMs / markdowns. Well, let's get started with the UI. I usually prototyping quite heavily on Vercel, building these different prototypes for different use cases as well. So the high-level overview is, once again, we're building software. AI engineering is not only pulling all the LLMs together, but it's actually making a smooth user interface and interaction with the users, because some part is agentic. The agent goes off and performs a certain action, while the other parts are still human-based. And this is kind of the interaction we are probably seeing more and more happening with different SaaS and different in-house builds. What's your kind of current understanding, maybe in best practices, how these GUIs or graphical user interfaces should be looking like? And then maybe I have a few nuances to add as well.
So, as we saw the rise of MCP for tools, we will see the rise of a bunch of different protocols for different things, because it is customary in the world of engineering to find standardized ways of going about things. Otherwise, every time you come up with new software, you have to reinvent the wheel. And for interactions, for front ends, the standard that has been gaining popularity for a few months now, I think maybe around a year, is GUI. Its protocol initially, MCP came from Anthropic, this one came from Microsoft, and it's still open source, so these companies are contributing somehow to the open source world. It is a way to have your system, your agent or your backend, connect with your front end through a series of events. So define around 16 different kinds of events. It can be simple chat messages. It can be your agent asking a question to the user, and the user can say yes or no, or can select between a bunch of options. And that is all standardized. So you can build your front end, you can build your backend entirely separately. You can even have different teams, different LLMs, different vibe coders doing it, and you can make sure that they'll be compatible. They'll be talking in a common language, and you can easily add this thing we've been talking about, and I think it's been a really important part of the systems, which is human in the loop, is having the LLMs interact with the user, having permission, explicit manual permission from the user to do things, or asking things from the user so the user can elucidate and can direct the agent.
I think some particular notion that's, I guess, sometimes a bit overlooked is that the default interaction with ChatGPT, for example, is still via text. And I do not see that happen in the maybe software as a service or startup world, where each and every single user, aka an employee, will be only texting with the chatbot all the time. I think it's coming more into the direction you just mentioned, Joao, that the AI or the agent is coming up with a particular suggestion. Maybe it's asking a question back to the employee or back to the user, and then maybe the user or the employee, which is basically the subject matter expert, can review a particular suggestion, maybe edit it, and then send it back to the AI, and it goes off and does the task. That's kind of one thing I see happening. Not a pure chat interface, but more as like a suggestion-based interface where, again, the agent comes, basically already thinks about the solution maybe, but then the user or the employee can amend it, basically. The second nuance here is as well, maybe on tool execution, as you mentioned quickly before, Joao, indirectly as well. Like there's probably some tool calls to be made, but simply because of maybe security reasons predominantly, but also price reasons of token compute, we don't want the agent just do whatever, generally speaking. Probably most likely it will be that the agent first thinks about the tool use or maybe a series of tool uses and then comes back to the user, gets approval, and then kind of executes. I can maybe put it on the screen. I saw that snapshot on a pretty interesting talk the other day where most of the token compute, just generally speaking, actually comes from the tool use anyway, not from the system prompts or the interaction. So we need to be a bit mindful because the tool usage itself seems to be, at least based on what we think as well and based on what I've seen in the industry, quite compute intensive.
I mean, and you have to keep in mind that these LLMs have been, since the beginning, overly confident. And I think they'll be like that for at least the near to medium future. That's how we usually build these LLMs, to always give out an answer however they can. I mean, it makes them extremely useful, but also the confident also means hallucinations sometimes. In the world of coding, like these agents who code, it's been, I've had at least 4 or 5 times a day where I ask to do something, it does it, and I review it, the code looks fine. Sometimes I change it a bit, but then it tries to run the code and it just gives out a command to run the code and test it out, see if it works. And because it doesn't know how the whole code base looks like, or doesn't know specifically how I usually run the code, the command looks wrong. Like it's going to call the wrong kind of program to run it. It's going to run it with the wrong arguments. And these things, and that's why it's important to have human in the loop interaction, is it doesn't run the command. It asks me to run a certain command. I have to approve or deny. So it's just a click of a button. I don't have to say yes. I don't have to type yes. But I can look at the command and I can choose where to go forward with it. Usually I deny it because I know it's a wrong command. It's going to give out the wrong answer. But it's just a point to have in mind that these systems, the LLM, will be overly confident. If you're building something like some agent for your system, for your company, or for a public-facing product, then you have to make sure, and you have to prompt it and have to create mechanisms for the agent, for example, to ask people things, either to get confirmation for something, or even if it's indecisive on how to do things, it'll ask people things. The way OpenAI did it, and OpenAI has maybe I think over $1 billion valuation and a few thousand engineers on their team. And the way they did it, if you go to deep research and you ask for whatever topic you want, 99% of the times, it's going to come back with you with like 5 questions. And only after you answer those questions, then it's going to go on their deep research. May take an hour, may take a couple days, hopefully not that much. But it'll ask those questions because it's been prompted and it's been designed specifically to say, before you go on this journey of research and going online and seeing papers and going to different websites, make sure you fully understood the user request. And it's very hard that someone will just write out the perfect request at the first time. So we'll ask, hey, did you mean this or this? Or actually also interested in knowing about this. So if I'm asking about, for example, a stock, I'm interested in why the hell is NVIDIA not going up? Like, do I want to know more about like the stock world? Do I have to know about certain concepts? It asks me what my level of knowledge is on the stock market. So it can then provide me the report that I want. And you can have a very similar thing in your agent, where especially if you have longer processes where the agent has to do multiple things on behalf of the user, have the agent ask the user things, get confirmation. So before you book something on the user's calendar, ask it, hey, can I book this on your calendar for this day? Maybe the user can then say, actually, it's an hour. I changed my mind. It's an hour later. Or actually, book it in a different calendar. So having this kind of modality, this kind of feature where you can have your user direct the flow of the agent will make your product that much better. Because keep in mind that whatever LLM you're using, it's probably going to be available for your competitors, for all the other builders out there who are going to make use of the best LLMs possible. So your system is modular. You can always jump to the new LLM, like the other guys are doing it. But what sets you apart and what makes your product better than others is how you engineer the context and how you engineer the flow of the agent so that it can interact with the users and can provide them with the best possible answer.
I think it sums it up perfectly. Maybe I would just add one more nuance. I mentioned at the beginning, this autonomy slider. I think we are in the world where most of the agentic artificial intelligence software is just being initiated, being built maybe, and then being deployed in weeks and months to come. So we are maybe a little bit on the lower end of an autonomy slider where, again, you would want to review most things the agent is proposing. So we maybe have it more on the left side if you have it on the UI. But then maybe more going into 2026, autonomy slider more shifts to the right, and more users are then confident and maybe comfortable as well, giving more autonomy to an agent. I think it's a nice feature. We talked about it before as well on multiple of our internal meetings, like autonomy sliders. How much autonomy should we give? How much autonomy should we subject to the user, or how much degrees of freedom we should give to the user to actually select the autonomy mode? I think this might be something that's happening early 2026, and we see more software as a services, or generally speaking, builds for AI that maybe have this particular feature. I think we've seen some nuance on Cursor already regarding that. Is it just autocomplete, or does it actually do some particular sense of execution? I think we are maybe seeing that in the world of more software as well. So that's more or less a wrap up for the GUIs. We're probably doing a little bit more deep dives in the future as well when we have some more insights to share, but that was a first attempt. I think we've never actually talked about GUIs, but they're becoming more in the center.
If you haven't built something, you might be thinking, oh man, but I really wanted to have something fully autonomous for my company. So I wanted to fully automate whatever the marketing team is doing. So I want to have this autonomous system, and you're saying that I have to have someone directing it or controlling it or basically supervising it. And it is possible to have something fully autonomous. Some companies have done it. But as I mentioned in the past, as you've seen maybe 1,000 or a couple thousand posts on LinkedIn, MIT report saying that most startups were failing, was exactly because it's exponentially harder to have something fully autonomous. So we're in the era of augmenting people, of making people X or 10X the productivity, but it's very hard to fully replace an entire department or an entire person, purely basically because you have to have multiple things done right. And the talent is scarce, technology is still pretty new, and the documentation is sometimes lacking. So it's hard to do something that's fully autonomous. If it's the first thing you're building, if it's the first attempt in your company at AI, then start with something that you can control the flow, have some idea on it. And if you see that it's going well, then you can slide the autonomy slider a bit further to the right and have it go a bit longer without having a human controlling or interacting with it.
I think it's still a little bit scary.
It is.
I put this paper here as well, which basically says it's mostly on the security front, and the core essence of the paper is that a little bit more reasoning will enhance security considerations as well. And there's all these attacks that you can make the model less reason, or you might be able to jailbreak it. And again, if you give all this full autonomy to all these agents and models, all these security layers also come into play, right? So they have to be more or less kept by themselves to be making sure that there is no attack vectors, and that's kind of a scary future. But that's more or less anyway where we are heading. We just need to make sure we have the correct evals, we have correct guardrails, we have LLM as a judge, all these concepts we've talked in the past, securely computed on a cloud setup, and then hopefully we're entering 2026 with, as you mentioned perfectly, autonomy slider more to the right. Just conscious of time, maybe 2-3 very brief nuanced topics, add-ons from last week's episode. We talked about vibe coding, and I quickly want just to add an additional quick layer. Don't have to go too much into detail. I will link the video we talked about vibe coding 2.0 here in the description as well, and on top of the video. The only thing I wanted to add on is like the overall notion. Last time we only talked about actually building the prototypes, but of course, there is many more layers to that. Authentication, maybe you want to have social logins, DNS servers, you want to have an SSL certificate, and maybe you actually want to push it to a GitHub repo. And of course, you want to deploy it and it to be visible basically online on a website basically. And all these things I just more or less checked in the last few days when I was building, or actually rebuilding a website that we are having. It took me probably 90% of the time. So 10% of the time was making the front end in Tailwind, in React, and then all the infra topics that I just mentioned was like 90% of the time. Quick disclaimer that actually saved a lot of time still was you can upload the error messages and everything on ChatGPT, so that's cool. That's maybe just my add-on to vibe coding 2.0.
For people who haven't built things, or for people who haven't deployed websites or this kind of platforms, you have no idea how many steps it goes from actually writing code on your computer or having code written by someone else to actually deploying it on a server securely, publicly available for anyone to access. I mean, there's a reason why companies, not even really big companies, the small to medium companies, have infra teams, have DevOps teams, have like entire departments that don't write code, that are not building anything, they're just helping other teams deploy their software onto the cloud. or onto whatever server they have in the back rooms. I mean, there are a lot of different knowledge that you have to acquire, and I think if you have an LLM at your disposal, then maybe you can skip hiring 15, 20 people
It does
to help
help
you in your process.
But it's still kind of funny, right? So you see the prototype or like the actual first build, but it still sits in your safe and secure environment on Versal v0, on Replit, on Lovable, and you actually never really deployed it. So all these like next steps are still super cumbersome, and I think AI should be able to do that in 26. So that's really what I'm looking forward to most. Actually, prototype to production, like all the infra layer is really also executed with AI. I think that's really the next frontier with vibe coding 3.0, where we hopefully can make an update in the future. Before we wrap up, one more thing. All the tech CEOs of many multiple companies met Donald Trump in the White House. That's pretty unique to see here. I put also a photo on the screen. Very high level. That basically means there is commitment from the West against the East. We have this combat happening actually between maybe China and the US. And I just thought it's kind of nice to see. We don't have to go too much into political discussion on this podcast. Yet still, it was interesting to see all these leaders in the White House lined up and then talking to the president probably about all the topics around AI, data centers, scaling, inference, compute in the US and all these topics. I thought it was an interesting facet, an interesting image. If you saw Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, the co-founder of Google, and many, many other executives in this room. Of course, Sam Altman from OpenAI was there as well. And then they were all lined up into this one room. I think that was a cool thing to see for the West. Because we were saying, Joao, are we from the West in Europe? Probably we are, although we are in the middle.
We're in a very unique position that we don't actively participate in model deployment or model inference like the US is doing. We don't have the R&D. I think the companies are not European. Like we don't have an equivalent of NVIDIA or equivalent of OpenAI just yet. We do have Mistral, the French company. I think it's like one of the major players, the European players out there. But we can benefit from both the US and Chinese and just Asian research overall. We have to be, I think, because Europe is highly regulated in terms of customer data, in terms of where data goes and how we can handle it. But if you know what you're doing, if you know the cloud, if you know your regulations, and I think there's a bunch of lawyers really happy right now that they can get to explore and give you consulting advice on that topic, you can make use of the best of both worlds. You can be the Hannah Montana of AI, which will be interesting. But then again, it's not particularly easy. There will be regulations, there will be changes. We hope the US does not restrict the available information on the available models, which is something that they've done in the past. Like if they're selling military vehicles or military weaponry, usually they sell a downgraded version than what they usually use. We hope we don't see it with AI, which will put us in a technological disadvantage. But we do have a lot of open source models out there already, so at least we're not seeing that trend coming from China anytime soon, and give us the space to actually build things and deploy things. That'll be interesting to see. I don't know what was decided on that room. I'm interested in whatever Tim Cook was saying, because I don't know what Apple's role is right now at the world of AI.
Well, we were always saying they were waiting until the AGI is here, whatever that means in 2030, just jump on this one and never spend a dime on training. Great. That's probably it for the episode. Just a quick roundup on GUIs, graphical user interfaces, vibe coding 2.0. We're very much looking ahead for 3.0, where we have all the infra topics as well. And this tech meetup, us Europeans are in the middle, hopefully, again, benefiting from both the Western and the East developments. Thank you, Joao, for joining. This was episode 27. These episodes are coming out every single week. We are sharing what we can and have researched in the last few days. So stay tuned for the next one. Feel free to subscribe and also add a comment and or message us on LinkedIn. See you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.
See you next week.